to ensure that humanitarian law is...
Hello and welcome, I'm Thomas Porteous and you're watching The World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories this hour. Yemen's Presidential Leadership Council Chief Rashad al-Aloumi cancels the defence deal with the UAE and orders Emirati forces to leave within 24 hours. He announces a 72-hour sea, land and air blockade after a Saudi-led strike targets alleged foreign support for UAE-backed separatists. The Saudi-led coalition says it launches a limited airstrike on Yemen's Mukalla port, targeting what it calls foreign military support for southern separatists. The strike comes amid escalating tensions between UAE-backed STC forces and Saudi-supported government troops, with no immediate report of casualties. US President Donald Trump says the United States could support another major strike on Iran if it rebuilds missile or nuclear programs, and warns Hamas of severe consequences if it does not disarm. Speaking alongside Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, he suggests Iran may be trying to restore its weapons capabilities. A senior advisor to Iran's supreme leader warns that any aggression against the country will face an immediate harsh response after Donald Trump threatens to eradicate any nuclear rebuilding. He says Iran's missile and defense capabilities are not containable and will be used if provoked. US President Donald Trump says he's not concerned about China's military drills around Taiwan, calling them long-standing naval exercises. The comments come as Beijing stages blockade-style maneuvers near the island following a large US arms sale to Taipei. South Korea says President Lee will visit China from January the 4th to the 7th as Seoul urges peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait. The Foreign Ministry says it hopes cross-strait relations develop peacefully through dialogue. Bangladesh's former Prime Minister Khaleda Al-Zia dies at 80, Bangladesh National Party has said. The party announces she passed away early on Tuesday and asks supporters to pray for her. Turkish police detained 110 suspects in a major operation against Islamic State a day after a deadly gunfight left 3 police and 6 militants dead in Yalova. Authorities say the raid followed an 8-hour siege and comes amid heightened security after recent mass arrests over alleged holiday attack plots. We have some breaking news coming in to start this hour, and Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has expressed deep concern over reports of an alleged attack on the residence of Russian President Vladimir Putin. In a statement, Modi emphasized that ongoing diplomatic efforts remain the most viable path towards ending hostilities and achieving lasting peace. He urged all parties involved to stay focused on those peace efforts and avoid any actions that could undermine them. Of course, we'll continue to bring you all the updates coming out of the Russia-Ukraine conflict as soon as we get them. Now, we move over to the Middle East, and Saudi Arabia has condemned the UAE's support for separatist forces in Yemen, calling it a serious threat to regional security. This comes after Saudi-led coalition airstrikes targeted Emirati-backed forces in the port city of Mukalla. Saudi officials say the strikes were in response to a weapons shipment from the UAE intended for separatists, escalating tensions between Riyadh and Abu Dhabi. The shipment, which arrived at Mukalla's port from the UAE's Fujairah, was deemed a threat to stability in Yemen. The UAE has yet to respond to the attack, and Yemen has also cancelled its defence pact with the United Arab Emirates as the conflict intensifies. Joining us now to discuss this is Sol Sadka, a political commentator. He joins us live from Tel Aviv. Thank you very much, Sol, for joining us and speaking to us here on NewsX World. How dangerous is this rift between Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Are we now witnessing a proxy war or a proxy confrontation, I should rephrase, between these two Gulf powers inside Yemen?
It could well be, as you said. To call it a proxy war might not be an understatement. It's not just the Saudis and the Emiratis who have their own allies in war-torn Yemen, but also, of course, the Iranians, and they all seem now to be going at each other using their various proxies. It's quite alarming. It's terrible for the people of Yemen, who are the most miserable and godforsaken people in the world, the most miserable place to live, where there has been endless war for decades now. And what will yet come of this is unclear. It's unclear why the Saudis and the Emiratis, who previously were relatively well wired together on the eastern parts of Yemen, the parts not controlled by the Houthis, are now at each other's throats. But time will tell. It's very early days.
Yeah, indeed. Do you think this escalation effectively destroys what remained of the coordinated coalition strategy in Yemen? Are we now heading towards a fragmented and even more chaotic conflict here?
It's hard to say. It's hard to say. What seems to have triggered this is the weakening of the Houthis themselves. So the conflict has largely been static for years now, but due to the strikes that the Houthis have taken, particularly on their top leaders a few months ago, when a bunch of them were wiped out by Israel, it seems that the Houthis are being pushed back. Their ability to rearm from Iran has also been limited, both by continual attacks on their supply routes and also continuing attacks on Iran. Iran, for the past 6 months, since they were brutally knocked out in terms of their military for a while. They lost a lot in June this year, and since then it could be they have not been able to supply the Houthis as well as before. So it could be that the weakening of the Houthis, who control approximately a third of Yemen, has reactivated the conflict to the point where other groups now smell blood in the water, and that will motivate them all to get back in the fight with the Houthis and perhaps also with each other. It's a real mess.
Sol, do stay with us after we move on. Of course, we'll continue to follow that developing situation in Yemen as it transpires. We now move on to another update, and according to reports, US President Donald Trump and his top advisors raised concerns over Israeli policies in the West Bank during meetings with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in Florida. The White House discussions focused on settler violence, expansion of Israeli settlements, and Israel's decision to withhold billions of dollars in tax revenues owed to the Palestinian Authority, a move that has pushed the PA towards financial collapse. The talks were described as cordial, but Washington warned that growing instability in the West Bank could undermine efforts to stabilize Gaza and expand the Abraham Accords. Asked afterwards whether he raised concerns about settler violence, Trump said he and Netanyahu discussed the West Bank at length and acknowledged differences, adding that he trusts the Israeli leader to do the right thing. Sol joins us once again. This is an Axios report that has just come out. Of course, now even the US is raising concerns about settler violence in the West Bank. Does Israel now accept that this is a serious problem, and why hasn't there been stronger accountability?
I would say like this. Every single time the Netanyahu-Trump meetings have occurred, I think this is 6 times now. Under no previous administration has any leader ever met with a foreign leader 6 times in a year. And every single time this happens, for weeks in advance, the press, particularly Axios, as you mentioned, has been predicting that there is a rift between Trump and Netanyahu, that they're arguing about everything, that they dispute all these things, there's tension, and that is always based on anonymous sources. And of course, the same thing happened this time. And yet, last night, we watched a press conference between Netanyahu and Trump, where again we noticed that these two men seem to genuinely love each other. They seem to have a personal affinity and friendship. And there was almost no way to put a piece of paper between them. And you would think that would make the reporters at Axios, who put out these reports predicting between the two, think. And yet, this morning we see that they are spinning what happened yesterday as some kind of rift between Netanyahu and Trump. When you actually watch the video, you see there was no such thing.
So Donald Trump has been vocal about Israel's actions in the West Bank. He said that he's not going to let Israel annex the West Bank. Of course, the Trump administration is particularly friendly to the likes of Saudi Arabia and Qatar, and who have also raised concerns about Israeli actions in the Palestinian territory. Why continue expanding these settlements at a time where the US is warning that instability in the West Bank could undermine regional diplomacy and even Israel's strategic interests?
I would consider as follows. You have to view it from the perspective of the Israeli public. The Israeli public was divided 20 years ago on the subject of whether it is worthwhile having Jews live in the ancient regions of Judea and Samaria and Gaza. And to the extent that in 2005, the public supported and voted in the government who promised to remove all the Jewish people from Gaza, and that was done. And we saw what happened as a result of that 20 years later. As a result, the general view of the Israeli public, which is, after all, a democracy, is that they have no further stomach for removing Jews from areas. And on the contrary, there are many who would like to see more Jews living in those areas. So that's what we're seeing. We're seeing the product of radicalization, reaction to Islamic terrorism, and a public that has no more stomach for piecemeal compromise. And one can only hope that, indeed, that Trump certainly wants to see the Abraham Accords expanded. They certainly want to see Saudi Arabia join them. However, Israel is only willing to compromise up to a certain point to make that happen.
Right.
Saudi Arabia stands to gain a lot more from joining the Abraham Accords than Israel. Israel, after all, is a very wealthy country with a GDP per capita of $60,000 per annum, richer than Germany, for example. And it's done that without any relations with Saudi Arabia or many of its neighbors. I'm sure it will benefit financially and in terms of peace from those relationships. However, it's doing quite fine without them. Okay. Saudi Arabia is entirely a petrostate and is looking into the future quite bleak, and certainly would like to have a military alliance with Israel, because Saudi Arabia has a lot of problems that are buried under the surface but very much exist. So hopefully we can come to these agreements, and hopefully by the fact that Israel will suspend further building in the West Bank will be used as a lever to make them come to the table and make everyone sit around and work together. And one can only hope that works. And then there will be no problem. Then it doesn't matter if there are another 1,000 Jews living in Judea or 1,000 less. That no longer matters if the entire region is at peace.
The occupied, yes. Okay. Sol Sadka, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's a pleasure to have you on the programme. We now move on and over to the Indo-Pacific. And South Korea has called for calm as dialogue and as tensions rise in the Taiwan Strait following China's largest ever military exercises around the island. Seoul said it wants cross-strait relations to develop peacefully through dialogue and cooperation, stressing that peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait remain critical. South Korea added that its long-standing position on Taiwan has not changed, while it maintains formal diplomatic ties only with Beijing. China said its military fired rockets and conducted live fire drills in multiple zones surrounding Taiwan for a second day as part of exercises codenamed Justice Mission 2025. Taiwan's defense ministry confirmed live firing north of the island, with debris landing within its contiguous zone. The drills began shortly after the United States announced a record arms package for Taiwan, further raising regional concerns. Let's listen in.
중국은 대만 해협의 평화와 안정이 지속이 되고 대화와 협력을 통해 양안 관계가 평화적으로 발전해 나가기를 희망합니다. 대만에 대한 우리 정부의 기본 입장에는 변함이 없으며 관련 동향을 주시하면서 한반도 평화와 안정을 최우선으로 우리 국익 정전을 위한 외교적 노력을 기울여 나갈 것입니다.
Collins Chong-Yu-Keat joins us now, a Foreign Affairs, Security and Strategy Analyst from Kuala Lumpur. Thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's a pleasure having you on the program. Do you think these exercises are defensive training, as Beijing claims, or are they intended to intimidate Taiwan and normalize a state of near constant military pressure?
Well, it aims to normalize these bellicose actions, psychological warfare on Taiwan, strict and stark warning to Taiwan and to Japan and the US that again Taiwan remains the ultimate red line for Beijing. We have seen that before for years now, and this is no exception. But this comment from Seoul is rare because we have seen how it reflects this concern over this regional spillover risk for South Korea in terms of mainly in terms of trade routes and economic stability. We have seen how Seoul is increasingly aligned with this broader Indo-Pacific status quo stability, and that its own security environment with both China and North Korea also. And of course, we have seen how the economic interests are closely tied with Taiwan in terms of supply chain, in terms of semiconductor sector stability. And Taiwan plays a critical role in this, not only for South Korea, but of course also for the world and for China and for the US. So we have seen this is a normal response from Seoul, but it is rare. And also it shows the complexity of Seoul's relations with both Beijing and Taiwan. And as much as Seoul wanted a stable tie, a stable partnership with Beijing, still concerns are raised on the possible ripple effects of any upending of rules or norms across the Taiwan Strait. And we have yet to see those kind of responses as akin to what Takaichi has stated. I don't think Seoul will go along that line in order to maintain its ties with Beijing, its economic ties most importantly. And we'll see that this is again another psychological warfare, a continuation of Beijing's own assertive actions on Taiwan, but stopping short of this readiness for war. As I've stated, it won't happen under Trump's watch, and this is again a reminder, a stark reminder by Beijing to Taiwan and to Japan that we should not cross the red line being set.
Indeed, and of course, President Lee Jae-myung is expected to go to China from the 4th of next month to the 7th. Do you expect this to appear in their discussions, or will that simply be undermined?
It will be undermined, but of course the president will most likely bring this up. And of course, again, Seoul would not want to jeopardize relations with Beijing, especially with this visit. And he would likely call for these de-escalation processes, and of course also to respect the normative stability of this region. But of course, again, I think the president will also most likely reiterate the stance of Seoul to respect the status quo and the one China policy, as has been, of course, expected by Beijing. So I won't see any kind of, different bold moves by him to upend or to cause, to upset the apple cart in this regard. The chief on his mind will be on the need for Seoul to have a new rebuilt economic ties with Beijing, especially, and that the Taiwan factor is not looming large on the interests of South Korea as opposed to Japan. And I don't see this, being raised as a frontline factor for Seoul to raise this meeting with the president in the days to come.
Collins Chong-Yu-Keat, thank you very much for joining us here on NewsX World. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. We now move on, and hundreds of supporters of the leftist Libre Party gathered outside Honduras' National Election Council in the capital on Monday, protesting the results of the recent presidential election. The demonstrators, led by former presidential candidate Rixi Moncada and the Libre Party leader Manuel Zelaya, rejected the results and demanded a full recount. They accused the electoral body of irregularities and fraud. Conservative candidate Nasrai Asfura, backed by the US President Donald Trump, was declared the winner after weeks of delays and technical issues with 40.3% of the vote. His nearest rival, Salvador Nasrallah, scored 39.5%. China Asset Management, the nation's largest ETF provider, has launched 2 flagship exchange-traded funds in Thailand, giving local investors easier access to Chinese blue chip and tech stocks. The new ETFs track China's CSI 300 index and the technology-focused Star 50 index and were issued as a depository receipt on the stock exchange of Thailand. Thai firm Investex Securities partnered with China AMC to manage issuance and market making. China AMC said the launch aims to attract medium to long-term foreign capital while reflecting strong local interest in Chinese assets. The move also highlights growing financial cooperation between China and Thailand under Beijing's Belt and Road Initiative. Well, that's all that we have time for this hour. Keep watching NewsX World for more international news updates.